Welcome to the What Was Good podcast with Zach and Schuyler. Thanks for joining us. Today, we will be discussing the top-grossing movie, book, and music album from 1982. We'll dive into Steven Spielberg's E.T. the Extraterrestrial, William Kotzwinkle's novel, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and Asia's self-titled first album, Asia. As always, if you would like to get a hold of us, we can be reached on email at whatwasgood@gmail.com or reach out to us on X at whatwasgoodpod. Thanks for joining us, and now enjoy the show.
Hey, welcome to the podcast. You're listening to What Was Good with Zach and Schuyler. I'm Schuyler.
And I'm Zach, so welcome in, everybody. Hey, before we get too far into this episode, I got fact-checked a little bit about the last episode.
Via email?
No, via you. I was told nobody cared about my Minecraft world, but it turns out that your daughter actually does kind of care.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
please read for the record what you were doing in your Minecraft world, because I don't understand it, but she did.
Okay, so I made a new world fairly recently, and my whole goal was to get into the trial chambers, which are like an underground battle arena type thing. So I did that. I found that, but before I even found it, I decided that I was going to find a mansion, like a dark oak mansion, which, if you know Minecraft, those are giant structures that are out there. And the one I found was like halfway buried. So I spent about a week and a half, 2 weeks digging it out. It was a lot of time. I think I dug like 18,000 blocks of dirt and like 24,000 blocks of stone. So I dug that out. And now I'm doing kind of the same thing with an ancient city, which is an underground city. So it's a lot of work, but it's fun. It's just mindless digging and breaking things. So that's essentially Minecraft for you right there.
Yeah, so I admit to being a bit of a Minecraft dilettante. Actually, not even that. I've never played. So
At all?
At all. I've seen people play. So what you're saying is that you did like an actual mining simulator where you just dig for weeks and weeks, and this is what kids love?
Excuse me, it's a little more complicated than that, but yes. I mean, the joke is that children yearn for the mines, so why did we ever get rid of child labor, right?
Yeah, I guess, man. They could be bringing in some income for the family.
Yeah, they could. Too bad Minecraft doesn't pay much unless you're like a streamer.
Like Dan TDM? Do you know Dan TDM?
I do, yes. My kids used to watch him regularly, but yeah. But that's not me.
There was a guy named Stampy?
Stampy Cat. Yeah.
Yes.
I know him.
Yes.
There's others too.
That's the end of my familiarity with Minecraft, I have to admit. Well, I know Steve.
So yeah, you know Steve. I watched for a while when I was a streamer a little bit myself. I would watch some of the speedrunners as they would beat Minecraft in under 10 minutes. And I beat it in under a day once.
No offense to the people making the film, but I kind of hope that's how the Minecraft movie goes. I think 10 minutes of that will be enough.
Oh, I'm so disappointed. I've seen trailers and things, and I feel like they could have done some kind of cool stuff, but as much as I love Jack Black, I don't think he fits that part, really. Just
I don't know enough about Minecraft to judge, but it doesn't look good. Of course, to be fair, 10 years ago, I didn't think the Lego movie looked good either, and it turned out to be incredible. So I'm going to keep an open mind, but with low expectations.
That's a fair analysis of the situation, yeah. I mean, I did love Jack Black as Bowser in the Mario movie, which was another make of a video game, so maybe it'll work here.
And speaking of low expectations, let's talk about the 2025 Seattle Mariners, who I know we kind of went silent for a while talking about Mariners on here, and there's good reason, because once again, Big letdown. They do not make the playoffs. Come close, but don't do it because they just aren't quite good enough.
They're the Mariners. That's why they didn't do it. And it's just, sadly, that's what we've come to expect. And I mean, they're right there. Always, they're right there in the mix of things. Finished one game out of the wild card, but that's just what we're used to, unfortunately.
Yeah, so I'm officially now on the Detroit Tigers bandwagon for the rest of the
Yes,
season.
absolutely. Absolutely. I have some friends from the area, and they're like, you better be cheering for the Tigers. And I said, I'm going to be disappointed if they don't win the World Series. They probably won't.
I've been wearing my Tigers hat around town lately because I lived in Michigan for a while, but I don't have any hats from that era. But last April, I was in there and skipped work
Oh, I
for a
remember
day
that.
to go to a Tigers game that had got canceled the night before due to snow. So it wasn't actively snowing, but I'd say it was like 38 degrees, maybe 40, and I didn't have a hat. My head was freezing, so I had to go to the team store and buy a hat. It's a nice hat. It's a nice Tigers hat. So now I have that to wear to show my bandwagon allegiance to the Tigers for October.
Yeah, and you have to, I mean, if you got it, you got to flaunt it, right? I mean, I still have, well, growing up, I was a big fan of the Cardinals, and I still have a Cardinals hat, mostly because their initials on the hat were the same as our last name, essentially. So that was one reason I was a big fan of the Cardinals.
They also didn't have a particularly good year.
No, but you know what? They did in the year that we're going to be talking about here in just a minute.
Speaking of the year we're going to be talking about, I don't know if you just saw the news earlier this evening that the sports related news that the Major League Baseball hit king Pete Rose passed away just this afternoon.
Oh, I had not seen that. Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah, so R.I.P.
Huh.
Charlie Hustle.
Yeah, think he'll get in posthumously?
I sure hope so, because let's get this straight. He was banned from baseball and from ever being allowed into the Hall of Fame for gambling on baseball, which now is a centerpiece of our economy. Sports gambling.
Absolutely
Everybody has it in their pockets. It's ruining lives all over the place. And for some reason, we haven't changed how the stance on Pete Rose. I think he should get in, like yesterday. I think he should have been let in at the beginning. But especially
I
now
agree,
that the
absolutely.
culture shifted.
Here, this might be a little bit of a hot take, and not particularly about Pete Rose, but I believe the steroid users should also be allowed in, because not only were they the best of their era, like they were competing against everybody else who was on steroids too, and so even if they were jacked up on juice or whatever you want to call it, they still had to compete against other people who were as well. And as much as we don't like that now, we look back and say, yeah, they shouldn't be using steroids. It's part of the history of the game. And to take that away from essentially a history book of baseball, the Baseball Hall of Fame, I think to take that away is unfair. So it might be a while before that happens, but I do think they should be let in.
I'm on board with you because that era was really freaking fun too.
Oh, so much fun.
Chicks
You remember
dig the
Sammy
long ball.
Sosa and Mark McGwire that year was just insanity and so much fun.
And I don't know if it's the steroids that fried Jose Canseco's mind so much, but he's so awesome now. I don't know if you follow him on Twitter. He's one of the master posters out there. I just love it.
Yeah, I saw one of his recent posts was actually pretty good about Ohtani being the first 50-50 guy, 50 stolen bases and 50 home runs, and he was the original 40-40 guy. So I get that tweet he put out. Well, shall we talk about 1982 a little bit?
Yeah, let's do it. I don't remember 1982. I was around, but I don't remember.
This is one of the few years that you were around and I was not. So you have more of a memory of it than me. Well, even if you don't have any memory of it. Subconsciously, maybe you do.
Yeah, somewhere stored in there.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you a few events that happened in 1982 to kind of get us feeling like what was going on and help us understand the situation of the world. A very simple situation of the world. Sports first. Cardinals, World Series champs that year. And kind of related to what I was just saying about the steroid era, the Cardinals that won the World Series that year hit a total of 67 home runs for the season. I don't know how that's...
You mean the entire team combined?
The entire team. I mean, that could be wrong, but I double checked that, and they didn't hit home runs. They stole a lot of bases. They played small ball, and that was good enough for them to win the World Series that year.
Well, yeah, that was the heart of the Ozzie Smith era, was it not?
Absolutely, it was one of my all-time favorite players growing up. So, got a couple signed cards by him. But yeah, that's a crazy stat, I thought.
Who'd they defeat in this?
Ooh, that's the one thing I forgot to look at, who they actually beat.
Nobody remembers the first loser.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter. For football, 49ers started going on their tear then, and that was their first Super Bowl victory. They beat the Bengals that year, 26-21 in the Super Bowl. And as little as I care about NBA, the Lakers were the champs that year as well. So, and also the World Cup happened that year, and Italy won the World Cup. So there's some sports trivia for you for 1982. Do you remember who was president then?
Well, I mean, I know who was president. I don't remember contemporaneously that Ronald Reagan was president, but I know my history enough to know that was the case. With Vice President George H.W. Bush, I believe.
Who later became president, of course. But yeah, that we were looking up presidential information. We're trying to figure out the timing of who all was president over the last 50 years. My wife and I were I don't even know why we were, but so yeah, Reagan right there, 1982 president. Not an election year, but
not that it's any related to what we're talking about. But how far back can you go?
Nixon, maybe.
I think I can get back to Hoover. We might have to do a trial here and see if I can back up what I claim.
All right.
So stick around to the end of the episode when you can hear me try to recite the presidents in reverse order from current.
Oh, I can't wait for that moment.
Yeah, keep that in mind, just to keep you on the edge of your seat and listen to the whole thing.
So a couple other things that happened in 1982. The city of Seattle got its nickname the Emerald City in 1982. No one knows the exact date, but it happened then. We both have connections to Seattle, of course. The Falklands War, Argentina attacking the Falkland Islands. So I don't know much about it myself, but that's what's happened in 1982. And get this, the very first computer virus was unleashed upon the world.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and it was spread by floppy disks.
So wait.
I imagine it was a very centralized computer virus because that couldn't get spread out too far since there was no internet back then.
So did we have the same problem back then that we do now, where people will just be like, "Oh, floppy disk on the ground. I better see what's on that," like we do with USB sticks now? Because I feel like nobody had computers at home in 1982. No. Computer use was pretty restricted to people that should have known better than to put a strange floppy in their drive.
I would hope so, yeah. And computers were just moving from the point where they weren't taking up a whole room anymore. They were now becoming personal computers a little bit, and the Apple IIe's and all those. So I would hope people would know, but you never know.
Wow.
It was new technology.
That's an interesting little factoid. Thank you for sharing that, Zach. Any other events from 1982 I need to be aware of?
No, not particularly. I'm sure there was plenty more, but I don't want to talk about anything else like that. So let's move on, shall we?
Were there any UFO sightings?
In fact, there were millions of UFO sightings, mostly on the theater screens. But that's what we're going to talk about a little bit more, I think.
Yes, here we are, 1982. This is our episode where we cover the most popular movie, book, and music of 1982. Most popular movie of 1982? E.T., The Extraterrestrial. Directed by Steven Spielberg, a classic. We're also going to talk about the most popular book, which was E.T. the Extraterrestrial and His Adventures on Earth, the novelization of the movie by William Kotzwinkle, not so much of a classic. And the most popular album of the year, but highest selling album of the year, which was the self-titled debut of the prog rock supergroup, I guess you might call them, Asia.
I guess that's one way to call them. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what's in store.
Okay. So it's weird to talk about a movie and also the same movie as a book, because this wasn't the book that the movie was based on. This is the novelization where they took the contents of the movie and the script and made it into a novel. And we'll get to the book in a little bit, but it's weird to have both two-thirds of our topic be one thing essentially. So, and who knows? Maybe this will be a little bit of a shorter episode because
I doubt it, because I have a lot of thoughts about both the book and the movie.
Okay, fair enough. So do I. Let's start with the movie. What'd you think of it?
Well, so this is a classic, right? Like I said, directed by
Absolutely.
Steven Spielberg, starring Henry Thomas as Elliot, very young Drew Barrymore, Dee Wallace as Elliot's mom, Mary, I think her name was.
Yep, Mary.
And a series of puppets and robots as the titular extraterrestrial, E.T. So I've seen this movie a bunch of times, right? I even saw it in the theater for the 40th anniversary a couple of years ago.
Nice.
Great experience. I'll just say up front that in watching this, I tried not to like it because it's cheesy, right? It's sappy.
It is.
But it's just so charming and good that at the end of it, I was like, dang it, this is a great movie and I love it.
You try to look at it critically, and in the end, it's still just fun. Yeah, I think that's a great take because that's exactly what it is. Yeah, so I had forgotten that Drew Barrymore was Gertie in this movie, the little girl. It's so crazy because I just randomly, we were watching 51st Dates the other night, the Adam Sandler Drew Barrymore movie, and I was like, wait a minute, that's the same person. So it's weird to think about, that's like 30 years different. So
well, she comes from a long line of Hollywood stars, right? Like Lionel Barrymore, who I believe is her grandfather, maybe great grandfather, was Mr. Potter in It's a Wonderful Life. So, I mean, this is a family that's been in movies forever.
Yeah, they really have. And so it made sense for her to be there as well. I hadn't watched this movie in probably since I saw it in 1989. It had been a long time. So my memory of it was pretty foggy. All I knew was that there was an alien. But one distinct memory I have of this, and I think we briefly discussed this last episode, was watching this movie at school for some reason. And for me, that was kindergarten in 1989. So it's such a weird memory to, like, after watching this movie now, I was like, why were they showing this at school? But they did.
It's an incredibly popular PG-rated classic. So you didn't remember much about this movie, and we may have some listeners that didn't remember much about this movie. So give us a rundown. What happens in E.T.? Like, what is this movie about?
So E.T. and his, brethren, his other extraterrestrials are visiting Earth, collecting samples, and they are chased away by a herd of guys that are coming. It is eventually revealed that they're scientists and they're trying to capture or have evidence of extraterrestrials. But E.T. is left behind, and it's his adventures meeting up with this boy named Elliot and his family, and everything that goes along with trying to get E.T. everything he needs to get back home, and trying to hide this alien from everybody around them. And as the government and scientists slowly close in on them and try to figure out how to help E.T. escape. So that's essentially the plot, very briefly summed up.
I also remember watching it probably that same day at the school.
Probably.
I have seen it a few times in the intervening years, and every time I watch it, it strikes me how beautiful it is. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking Steven Spielberg here. He's very good at what he does, right? These great silhouette lighting situations, especially early on when things are mysterious, like the humans that are chasing ET are just these black hulking silhouettes against a night sky. Um, they go out into the yard once ET's in Elliot's shed, and there's just this light beaming out of the shed, like illuminating the world that's all dark. There's just a whole lot of really good looking stuff in this movie. As it's Spielberg, there's also a whole lot of really cheesy, sappy, emotional, and emotionally manipulative stuff in this movie.
I think maybe my favorite part of watching it this time was that I had my 13-year-old one to watch it with us, and just watching her emotions throughout, whether it's reacting to the dog getting some potato salad from ET, or as ET is lingering towards the end, and how she was fretting about that. So, but you're right, it absolutely pulls on your emotions, and it's sappy, but it does it well, like you said. So that was a lot of fun for me.
And what made me mad, or not mad, but I'm feeling, come on, this is getting too manipulative. And then at the end, it pays it all off, right? A lot of movies don't do that. Worse movies don't do that. They just manipulate your emotions like, oh, we need something emotional here. Let's have a character die, right?
Yeah.
This one does that and then brings him back to life. And you're just like, yes! Like you go full circle and it pays off. And yes, I'm emotionally manipulated and I love it.
Yeah, that was actually one of the comments I wrote down. Like as I was watching the movie, was like, I don't remember it being this sad, but that was when ET was kind of lingering towards the end, and I was like, oh man, my daughter looked like she was about to cry almost, and then hallelujah, ET's back and he's going home. So yes, you are manipulated, but you love it.
That scene where E.T. lets go of Elliot because he doesn't want Elliot to die too. It's just like, man.
Yeah, yeah. So one of my other memories, or one of my thoughts I had about this, was like you said at the beginning, especially where everything is just kind of silhouetted and you don't even get to see ET really until a little bit later on. Like there's just so much what's happening, who knows what's going on, and what is this alien thing exactly. I mean, you see the kids and everything's normal with them, but then hiding in the shadows everywhere, you see fingers, you see one eye. But it is a good payoff when you finally get to see ET and you're like, okay, so that's what we're working with here. It's a lot of fun though.
Yeah, and I love the way that E.T. is framed as mysterious but good, and the scientists are framed as mysterious but bad. Like if you go to older sci-fi movies, the way that the scientists are shown in this one is very much like you would treat the alien invaders, right? These big scary guys you know nothing about, and then especially when they actually invade the house, they're dressed as
Oh
astronauts
man.
essentially, just like these giant robotic alien looking creatures storming in at every door, every window. It's terrifying. I remember being scared of that as a kid because it is scary.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was watching my daughter when that scene came on, and she was like kind of a little bit frightened of what was happening. I mean, there's these astronauts are breaking into their house and they want to steal ET, who's become so beloved to the family already. Yeah, and I actually had a note written down. It's like the mystery around. They don't even say a name. I call him Keys, just because he carried his keys everywhere. Kind of the head bad guy. It's like it's never explicitly said that these guys are bad, and it doesn't ever seem like they want to do terrible things. But it's just the way the story works. They are the bad guys, and I love that. It's kind of the opposite of the alien invaders, like you said. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I don't think they actually end up being bad. I think once things get revealed, they're maybe not good guys, but no worse than neutral, which is another thing I like about this movie. There's no high stakes battle of good versus evil.
it's true.
It's just we're trying to help ET go home. And that whole scene from when I guess his heart turns back on because the alien ship is now close enough to the Earth that he can psychically communicate with his
I
brethren.
think that's what it is. Yeah.
Okay, but the whole sequence from when his heart turns back on to the end is just some of my favorite filmmaking of all time. There's like at least 3 iconic scenes in just that short 20 minutes where they steal the van with ET in the back, drive to the
Yeah.
playground, and I love when Elliot's brother Michael says, "I've never driven forward before." And he's stealing a van with the only alien on Earth in it.
That part right there had my favorite line of the entire movie, where after they have invaded the house and they've got scientists coming and going, and just it's completely covered in plastic. No one can get in or out, or no one outside. It pans to an audience of onlookers, and the friends that they escape on the bike with. One of them says, "I think something's happening." Just like, well, duh. Come on. There's military vehicles, there's science equipment everywhere, there's police everywhere. Yeah, something's happening, all right. So that was my favorite line.
Those perfectly timed comedic lines, I think they're needed because this gets really intense, and so every once in a while you got to break it up with something funny like that. Yeah, it's so good. But
Yeah, that's
when they get to the
Spielberg
park,
classic.
yeah, when they get to the park and they get on their bikes and there's the bike chase, Stranger Things basically ripped this like word
Yes.
for word from ET. And that's how iconic this is. Jumping over construction, and then when the bikes take off into the air above the cops that are trying to stop them, it's just like you want to stand up and cheer. Such an iconic moment.
I actually made that note about Stranger Things as well. I was like, this is like, it's what it is.
How could you not, right?
Yeah. I also made a note that kind of along with the same, like, just those boys on the bike. I mean, they were the Dungeon and Dragon friends. How it reminded me a little bit of the Dead Poets Society, that group of boys, and they're trying to do something epic and big and very different scenario. But I mean, it was a very 80s thing, and it fit for me. I don't know if it's accurate, but I made that connection.
Interesting. Yeah, one of the things that surprised me about it is that there's actually the scene with Elliot riding his bike in the air in front of the moon is like iconic, right?
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
It's the logo of Amblin Entertainment, one of Spielberg's companies. But what I'd forgotten is that they do it again in front of the sun with all 5 of them.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. I get a little, on these emotionally manipulative movies, I start getting too sentimental or analytical, and it's like, oh, so they ride in front of the moon, as the cold moon, as ET is dying. And then as he's coming back to life, they're riding in front of the warm, life-giving sun. So it's all that symbolism in there too, man.
Okay, got it. Yeah. I gotta admit, I wasn't quite sure what to expect going into this again because it had been so long. But knowing it's a Spielberg movie, it's like you know what you're gonna get. It's gonna be entertaining. It's gonna be a lot of fun. You're gonna have Muppets. That's just what it is. Especially one made in the 80s. There's gonna be puppets and things. And I was watching the credits a little bit, and I saw it took 13 people to run ET. Like they all the different moving parts. Some of them had specialized parts that they were moving, but
Wow.
like 13 people to run this one character, and that's to me is crazy. But I mean, that's what was needed.
Well, they did a good job. He feels like a real character, not a puppet, a machine.
Especially when he's drunk.
Oh man.
That was a great scene.
It makes me a little uncomfortable every time Elliot grabs this random girl and kisses her. But one thing, so not to jump to the book too early, But the same thing happens in the book, right? And
Yes, it
the guy
does.
writes in the book that the ET has consumed a 6-pack of beer, which is not much alcohol for a human, but a lot for
I
ET.
know.
And I was like, dude.
I don't know if I could do a 6-pack anymore.
Yeah, I think I would be in the same shape as ET if I tried to do that.
Walking face first into the wall.
Maybe this says something about William Kotzwinkle. I don't know, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, there was. It's a lot of fun, and that whole scene where he's drunk. My daughter was cheering for the release of all the frogs. She was like, "Yes, that's what I would have done too! Woo, woo, yeah!" So there was a lot of, like you said, emotional like manipulation, but it's usually in the positive way, and it makes you feel good for the most part, even when things are kind of sad.
Yeah, and it serves the story, and I think that's the key point of it. It's not
Yeah,
just there to be manipulative. It's also
yep,
there for the story.
absolutely. Okay, one other comment before we move on to anything else, or I don't know if we are yet. I absolutely love everything John Williams does, and I don't think that's not, I think that's how everybody feels. I mean, his score, you don't, you don't even think about it. It's just so ingrained in the movie. I didn't even really think about the music at all until like the last 15-20 minutes, but then I started thinking back about how good it was just throughout the entirety of the movie, and just how that plays into all the emotional aspects of it as well. So man, John Williams, one of the greatest of all times for movie scores, and this was no difference there on this
Yeah,
one.
this is an incredible score, and I'm trying to think. Maybe 10, 12, 13 years ago, went to Universal Studios. Maybe, well, whichever theme park in Florida has the ET ride. I think it's Universal Studios,
Or is
and
it Epcot?
it's definitely not Epcot. I would know that. I'm pretty sure it's
Oh,
Universal.
okay.
It's
I
this
don't know.
you have ride around in the dark. You're kind of you're on these bikes. They're not real bikes, but that's the seating. And it broke down while we were on it. We were on there for like 15 minutes until they got it started, but it was playing the John Williams score over and over, just a segment of it. So it was like, there's worse places to get stuck. It's nice and cool in here. Get out of the Florida heat, listen to some good music. Seats aren't particularly comfortable, but it was okay.
You could have been stuck in Country Bear Jamboree or something.
So
uh,
I want to comment about the weird familial dissolution and father replacement stuff that's in this movie.
Please do.
So Mary and her ex-husband are divorced, right? He's run off to Mexico. He's just gone, right?
Yeah.
Elliot wants to talk on the phone with him, but they barely get a chance. And then in comes this stranger to their house that cares very much for Elliot, links with him deeply, right? So they're synced up even. And then there's this really weird scene, and we'll talk more about this in the book, on Halloween, where they've got E.T. dressed up as a ghost so he can go out with them, and then they can get away into the woods and build his communicator so he can phone home. But there's this scene that we see from E.T.'s perspective, from inside the ghost mask, where
Oh
it
yeah.
pans up from Mary's feet up to her face in, I'm going to have to call it a leer. Like E.T. is like, "Whoa, baby, Mary," and which is really, really strange for like, why would an alien think that about Mary? And so I can't help but think the ET serves as almost like a stand-in father figure who Elliot gets to choose to separate from at the end and go through that closure process to say goodbye to ET instead of just having him disappear like his dad did. He gets to do that by his own choice.
That's an interesting perspective that I hadn't even considered. Like,
Well,
I know
uh,
we'll talk more about it with the book, but go ahead.
what I was going to say is you should watch The Fabelmans, the Spielberg movie from 2022. That is a loose autobiography, sort of.
Okay.
It explains a lot about a lot of his movies and that weird mother father, separation stuff. It's like very eye opening. Like, oh, okay, I get it now. I get it.
You see it in a lot of his movies?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I guess I hadn't really considered I mean, knowing that we're going to be talking about the book here in a second, the whole sexual tension between E.T. and Mary is definitely played out more in the book. But yeah, there is that one scene, and I guess I hadn't even thought about him being like the father figure. So I like that.
Let's be clear. I don't think there's sexual tension between them, even in the book. It's very, very one way.
It's true. But it's definitely more played out in the book.
Oh my gosh. So before we get to the book, we should wrap up our thoughts about the movie. So, like I said, I really enjoy this one. Even when I try not to, I can't help myself. It's just too much fun.
I agree. So I'm going to give you a grade for this.
I would love to hear it.
I have it teetering on A minus, B plus, and I'm leaning more towards an A minus minus. I think that's probably where I am, just because it's a really good movie. It's a lot of fun elements in it that all work together, and that's just where I landed.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's an A minus for me, which it's kind of nice when the most popular movie is actually good, because this was extremely popular. It's made a ton of money.
Oh, yeah, it did.
I didn't write down how much it made.
It made
but it
enough,
was a lot.
But it was, yeah. But it wasn't one of the ones that was an award winner and top grossing like our last one with Lord of the Rings. But yeah, it made a lot of money. I didn't write down what it made either.
It did get nominated for Best Picture, though. So there is that.
Did not.
Yeah. It's a big hit all around. Lots of toys came out of it. I was at a knockoff, unofficial Harry Potter street festival over the weekend and went into a vintage toy store, and sure enough, they had a stuffed E.T., probably from 1982, selling for $45. I was like, I don't know, that seems kind of reasonable.
Yeah, in today's economy, yeah, $45 ain't bad at all. So should we talk about the book?
Well, I was gonna say, what I couldn't find at the vintage store or at any used bookstore or at my library or on Amazon to buy new is the 1982 novelization of E.T. by William Kotzwinkle. So instead, I had to go to a pirate website and get a scanned PDF of the book. So each page was a scanned JPEG of a page of the book. It was not super pleasant to read on my Kindle, but I did it.
I was actually able to find one physical copy of this book. The library system we're a part of, I think it has 17 or 18 libraries. And between the 17 or 18 libraries, there was one physical copy. So I got it delivered to my library, hesitated on reading it because I knew it was probably going to be terrible, and read 200 pages of it today and finished it today. So it's fresh on my mind. And oh man, I wish it wasn't.
I'm going to be upfront. This is probably the worst book I've ever read. It's hard for me to even describe it as a book. Right?
It isn't really, is it?
This is why I'm glad I did not give the Da Vinci Code an F. Because I needed to leave room for things to be worse than that. And this is so much worse. Like, now I feel like I was not fair to the Da Vinci Code.
That's what's interesting about doing this podcast is it's like I'm forever giving Driving Miss Daisy a D is going to always haunt me. But after watching more things, it's like, oh man, I was so far off. And I think I gave Da Vinci Code a C, if I remember correctly,
Yeah.
or maybe it was might have even been like a B minus. But yeah, this one is definitely below that. And you gave me this tidbit of information, but I'm going to share it anyway. this is the same author that did the children's series of books about Walter the farting dog. And I had those when I was a classroom teacher. I had 3 different books from that series in my classroom library, and the kids absolutely loved them. So to think that he wrote this novelization of E.T. is just wild to me that even exists.
I hope he got paid well for it because it sold a lot of copies. And I mean, he's probably not hurting for money. The Walter books are pretty popular, I believe.
I think so. Maybe not so much anymore, but I think they were.
I don't think he spent much more time writing this than he did writing a children's picture book, to be honest.
Probably not. I agree.
I've just started reading the award winner, National Book Award winner for fiction for 1982, Rabbit is Rich, which we'll be talking about on our next episode. And it is hard to even accept the fact that that book and the E.T. novelization are the same type of thing. They're so dramatically different, and the E.T. book is so bad that I don't even want to call it a book. That does disservice to the name book.
I love this. Yeah. Oh man, it's a novelization. Just the whole idea of novelizing a movie. I mean, so many movies are based on books, but to make the book based on a movie and then to just add weird context that doesn't exist in the movie.
Yeah, so here's the thing. I don't think this was actually
man.
I don't think he'd seen the movie.
It feels like he hadn't.
I bet this was based on an early screenplay. They're like, we want this novel to come out the same time as the movie. Movie's not ready for you to see yet, obviously. So here's a screenplay that got edited quite a bit. I mean, just look at there's M&Ms in the book and Reese's Pieces in the movie. Not that that makes a difference, but that was there in the movie from the very beginning. So like none of this was ready to go for him to watch. So he just winged it based on a screenplay, is my guess.
Yeah, and I actually researched that a little bit. It was based on the screenplay, but I think it was, like you said, the first writing of that. It went through 2 rewrites before it became the script that we know. And I think he had the original that wasn't rewritten at all and based it on that. And oh man, it was just, it was, like I said, I read most of it today, and it was really easy to read, mind you, because there's no complication to any of it whatsoever. But there was so little content in it. There was a lot of really long, repetitive descriptions of things that showed up 7, 10, 15, 30 times throughout the book because he had nothing else to say. But there wasn't much to this at all.
So what were some of the weirdest things for you about this book?
Well, I mentioned already kind of the sexualization of Mary's character. And I mean, I guess you see that a little bit in the movie where Elliot says something about his dad running to Mexico and she's upset about that. And you can tell there's obviously some emotion built into that. But in the book, it was like every thought she had was, I wonder if that thing out in the shed is a man. Maybe he'll come in and seduce me. Or, maybe this thing at my door is actually going to be a tall, dark, and handsome man. No, it's not. It was it was hard.
Well, that wasn't all of her thoughts. She also had a lot of thoughts about how she was overweight and needed to use her expensive skin cream to look younger. Yeah, she was a very one-note character, very one-dimensional. But the sexualization from E.T. So in the book, E.T. is like desperately in love with the willow creature, as he thinks of her.
Yes. Oh, I hated that so much.
I don't recommend anyone go out and read this book, but there's no way that we can express the weirdness of that relationship that E.T. has towards Mary. Like, no, It's just not going to make any sense unless you read it. And please, for the love of God, do not.
Just don't. But okay, so it starts off by like describing ET as like a 10 million year old being who's traveled the universe and been all
Mhm.
over the place. And that's adding context to the movie that isn't really even necessary. And then by the end of the book, he's saying about Mary that she must be the most beautiful being in the entire universe. Dude, you're 10 million years old and this is a typical human woman. How do you reach that point? I just
Yeah.
don't see it. So, yeah, that was a little off-putting to say the least.
By the end, it's also made clear that not only is he an ancient being, he's practically a god, and if he dies, he might turn into a black hole and obliterate the whole Earth.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then it wasn't the alien spacecraft coming back close to Earth that brought him back to life. It was the actual planet Earth sending a beam of energy from the core into his heart to restart it because Earth was part of this larger universe that was all connected and wanted this ancient god to stay alive. None of it made any sense at the end.
No, it really didn't. And although it did say that beam might have actually come from another planet, it was just a beam that brought him back to life. And
Oh, right. Yeah, I don't want to do any Mars erasure or Venus erasure or whatever planet it was. Yeah.
there was a reference to Venus somehow.
Whatever they did in the rewrites to get from this book to the movie
Thank God.
Thank God.
Yeah. I wonder if this book, I mean, obviously did not need to be written. And I felt like it took away from the movie, having experienced both of them in the same time frame. I felt like, now the movie isn't as good because I have all this extra added context that doesn't exist in the movie, and I don't want it to exist in the movie. It doesn't need to be there, but it's in my mind now because I had to read this book. Thanks.
Yeah, usually it goes the other way, right? You read the
Absolutely.
book and then you watch the movie and you're like, it doesn't except it doesn't ruin the book. It's just not as good as the book. This is not as good as the movie, but also partially ruins it.
Somehow it does, but oh man, it's so bad.
There are a couple of things that could be clever in a better book. So I did at first time it happened, kind of like when suddenly the perspective shifts to the dog or
Yes.
to one of the plants outside and they are all somehow conscious, but that didn't end up being clever. It just ended up being stupid like everything else. We don't need to know that a flying owl was afraid of Elliot on his bike. That adds nothing. It just pads the word count and doesn't put anything into the larger story. It was just a real bummer because that was the one part I thought might be at least a little bit clever.
Yeah, that could have been. I mean, it could have been fun to see that in the movie as well. I feel like the dog, especially, and the relationship E.T. and the dog have in the book. I actually like that because they like become best friends and they explore the house together at night, which is I could imagine that happening because E.T. is there and giving him potato salad or whatever, and he's drinking beer with him. But yeah, you're right. That didn't play out in the movie at all, and it didn't need to be in the movie, but it's something that could have been good. I think it wasn't done well in the book, but it was there in the book.
Yeah, and that could have been a fun addition to the movie, except for the fact that every time they explored the house at night, there was a stop in Mary's room to just stare lovingly at her beautiful face. Yeah, so we didn't need more of that.
No, we definitely did not. That was not many books make me that sad to read. Luckily, like I said, like the Da Vinci Code, it was a really quick read. Like it didn't consume too much of my time, which if it had consumed a lot of time, it probably would have been like the last book that I didn't read and just said, no, I can't do this.
Yeah. There were no complicated sentences in this book. There were repetitive sentences. How many times do you think he used the word nerd in the chapter talking about Lance, one of Elliot's D&D friends?
But no, he wasn't even a D&D friend. He was just some nerd from the school that, yeah, he was just some kid that had feeling about E.T. that just appeared in the book and wasn't in the movie at all. But yes, nerd and umbrella stand, because that's about how big E.T. was, right? The size of an umbrella stand.
So, in a way, I appreciate the fact that every time the book talks about how tall E.T. is, it compares him to an umbrella stand, which I feel like umbrella stands come in various sizes.
Yeah.
That is a very uniquely human way to be a bad writer. We're in the age of generative AI now, right? And often, I mean, generative AI is a perfectly average writer. That's functionally how it works, right? It averages out a bunch of things, but what it does is it almost is like a thesaurus. AI would never repeat the same description 15 times back to back.
But Henry Kotzwinkle certainly did.
So this is a uniquely human way to fail at writing a book, and I appreciate it for that, at least. No AI could be this repetitive and bad.
My favorite use of describing E.T. as the size of an umbrella stand was when Mary kept getting these visions in her head of something about the size of an umbrella stand waddling at her with a candy bar in its hand.
Oh boy.
I mean, to be fair, E.T. in the movie, he waddled and he loved candy, but oh man.
Can you imagine what that must have been like? I mean, we can even think about it from the human perspective of somebody from like a couple thousand years ago, and you give them a handful of Reese's Pieces or M&Ms or like a candy bar.
Oh man.
It would be revelatory. No wonder why he loved this stuff.
Yeah. Well, in the book, it was just like the nutrient packets that he had from his planet.
Oh yeah. I forgot about that.
An unneeded detail. More context that didn't matter at all.
I'm actively trying to forget the contents of this book. I'm going to delete that PDF as soon as I can because it's just bad and it didn't need to exist. And I think I mentioned this towards the very end of our last episode, so maybe a lot of people didn't hear it, but I think this kind of novelization could have only existed for a little while in the early 80s, right? As the rise of home video was starting, but not ubiquitous. So some people would be able to watch E.T. on VHS at home, but most wouldn't. But the fact that some people can makes you want to do something related to E.T. So you buy the book and are probably extremely disappointed.
I mean, especially when you later watch the movie and you're like, what was up with that book? I personally can't give this an F. Knowing that there is another novelization that we're going to need to read, I want to give some room for that one to possibly be even worse. So I have to give this a D-. I have to give this a D- just because that doesn't give me anywhere else to go in case we do come across another terrible book. So
I have to give it an F.
No, and that's completely reasonable.
If the other novelization is this bad, I'll give it a lower F. If it's worse, I'll give it a lower F. I'll give it an F-. I don't care. This is in no way should you read this book. There's no redeeming quality to it. What's funny is that E.T. the movie, like we said, was good. E.T. the book is bad, but not famously bad because nobody remembers it. But E.T. the video game was also bad, but famously bad. So it's interesting that this is maybe an untranslatable movie because the story is kind of dumb, maybe, but the way that it's executed in the movie works on every level. So I don't know what's going on here.
I guess Steven Spielberg didn't have his finger in other parts of it, and so the magic didn't translate. We'll say that.
Yeah, I never played the Atari game, but I've heard it's bad and that there's millions of copies in a garbage dump somewhere, as the legend goes.
Someday those will be exhumed by an architect or not an archaeologist, and people will wonder about our society for sure.
Yeah, they'll probably think that E.T. was the most popular thing. This is a holy book or like a holy cartridge that we played at church and worshipped. No, guys, you're way off.
I hope they do come to that conclusion, though. Yeah. All right. Shall we talk a little music?
Yeah, let's do it. Tell me about 1982's most popular album.
It's Asia by Asia. For me, this is the entirety of 80s music right here. I feel like when someone says 80s music, you don't know it, but you are thinking of this album when they say that. Just the sounds, the songs, the lyrics, the voices. This is 80s music. Like in our souls, we know that this is it. That's how I perceive this album.
Definitely the sounds. I think maybe there's one or two songs on here that had any staying power, but everyone sounds like you. There's no way you would confuse this for an album from any other era.
Right? Oh no, not a chance.
Exactly right. And Asia was kind of a super group, right? They had members from Yes and members from the Electric Light Orchestra and a couple of other of these proto prog rock bands that got together and, well, apparently extremely succeeded, because not only does this album have a badass cover of a dragon over the ocean and like this floating orb, but it was a hugely popular album. And not in the heat of the moment. I think that's a movie. The heat of the moment, or just heat of the moment. Let me get this name right.
Yeah.
Of the first track on the album. It's a great song. Perfect encapsulation of the 80s.
And everybody would recognize it within the first few seconds of it starting. And there's a couple songs on this album that I feel like as soon as they started, like, oh yeah, I love this song. I couldn't have ever told you who sang it, but I recognized the song. And I think that's true of like, there's like 3 or 4, I think, on this album where I've heard it for the first time or listening through this time. And I was like, oh yeah, I know this one. Yeah, this was on Cats FM a few times, I remember. And there's just the channel I was listening to, and it was there. It was in my conscious, and I couldn't have ever told you it was Asia, though.
Yeah, I don't think any of the songs, for me at least, capture the magic of the first one, Heat of the Moment. The album starts out with the best song on the album, I think. And so it kind of goes downhill from there, but none of them are bad. What struck me is how much some of them sounded like the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Of course,
the rock metal prog rock Christmas band that just plays Christmas songs. Or basically, they play this kind of music but add sleigh bells to it.
The most successful rock Christmas band ever, I think. Probably.
Yeah, I believe
they still tour.
You yak for a while, because I'm going to look up and see if there's any overlap in the members of Asia and Trans-Siberian Orchestra. I should have done this ahead of time. So go ahead and give us some more feedback on some of your favorite songs.
So one song that jumped out for me was Time Again. Not because it was an exceptionally good song or anything, but when it opened, I found myself sitting on my couch watching Spinal Tap. To me, it sounded like the opening for Spinal Tap's song Stonehenge, which opens with one of the characters in Spinal Tap talking about Stonehenge, and it's like, in ancient times, the Druids lived and they built Stonehenge. And this song, Time Again, just reminded me of that opening. And I didn't even know it at the time. Like, as the first time I was listening to it, it was just like, wait, this isn't Spinal Tap. This is Asia. And I've loved that, because Spinal Tap is one of my all-time favorite goofy movies, the rockumentary. And this, I felt like this band could have been playing the songs in Spinal Tap for sure.
Yeah, I could see that. So I did look it up. There's no overlap. The guys
Oh,
that
bummer.
made Trans-Siberian Orchestra came from a heavy metal band called Savatage, not Sabotage, Savatage with a V. And their
Oh,
debut album came out in 1983, so could very
oh,
well have been
okay.
influenced by the most popular album of 1982. So
That's very, yeah.
I'm
What,
I'm
when,
making a tenuous connection there, but whatever.
could be. Who knows? Somebody will fact check that if they want to. Um, what another thing that struck me about this album is that it's only 9 songs. We're so used to albums nowadays having 15 plus songs. I mean, last album we looked at, yes, to be fair, it was 2 albums combined into one, but it had 39 songs on it. Each one had 19 and 20 songs on it. So to have it only be an album that's only 44 minutes long and only 9 songs is kind of crazy to me, but that's pretty it seems like that was pretty common back in the 80s to have shorter albums like this.
Well, I think that was part
From
of the format, right? This was not pre CDs. CDs already existed, but not everybody had them. So this was cassettes or LPs,
8
right?
tracks.
Records. I that again, I don't remember this era. I don't remember when 8 tracks phased out.
Okay,
But
I can
anyway,
say this. I'm going to interrupt you because as I was looking up information about 1982 was actually the first year that CDs were produced.
okay. So this album did not sell on CD.
No, it did not.
So that explains the 44 minutes. You're limited by the technology you have unless you're going to do a double album with 2 records that sprawls across an hour and a half. This is a radio play album.
Yeah, I hadn't even considered that so much, but that's very true. Technology has changed quite a bit over the last 30 years. 40 years? Oh no, I'm dating myself.
We can all do the math.
Yeah, yeah. So I think my favorite thought I had about this album is I listened to all 9 songs in a row without looking at any information, just listening and experiencing them. And I was correctly able to name 8 out of 9 of the songs without looking at the titles of any of them. After the song was over, I could name what it was. I could say the name of the song because of how repetitive the chorus was. And they have to say the title of the song like 47 times throughout that song.
I did not notice that.
You should listen to it again and see how often they say the title.
I'm going to have to do that because it is a pretty good album. I enjoyed this one. I especially love... I'm going to come back to the first song, Heat of the Moment. It is a certified classic. It's going to go in my karaoke playlist. And my favorite thing about that song is the way the snare drum sounds when it comes in. It's this hugely reverby. Sounds like these guys are playing in an ocean cave, playing the drums in an ocean cave, just with the reverb while the dragon is out there over the sea. And like, this is just a perfect match of imagery and sound, and like you would see them driving around town in a van with that dragon painted on the side on the way to their gigs.
Yes, I can see that now. I'm trying to remember. There's a Pixar movie that came out fairly recently. Maybe it's not Pixar. It's an animated movie where
it was Pixar, yeah.
Do you know which one I'm talking about? I can't remember the title of it.
I'm going to sit here and make you remember the title.
Oh man, the 2 brothers are driving around trying to bring their dad back, and they've got that van, or the older brother, that's like his pride and joy. I honestly can't remember what it was called, but it's like I'd just be making something up at this point, so I'm never going to remember.
I actually don't remember either. But I do know the movie because I watched it during the pandemic. It was one of those that was supposed to come out in theaters, but then quickly pivoted to Disney Plus.
Yeah, but that was the van. Like you've seen that van in movies and shows and everything, and I could see Asia driving around in that band if they weren't already superstars. That would be what they would be in. But like you said, they were already mostly superstars anyway before they released their first album. So
where'd you end up on this one?
So it's a good album. I enjoyed listening to it. It's on my car ride to work nowadays. I gave it between a B and a B plus, just because there's other albums out there that are better. It's enjoyable. It's fun. It's not amazing, but it's a good album.
Yeah, I agree. I ended on a B because, like you said, it captures the essence of the 80s, but after this, other people, I think, did it better.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So they perfected the Asia sound I mean, it wasn't just Asia. This was a very 80s sound that I think got better later. In fact, there's one particular song that could have been played by them, but isn't, that I think is a better than any of the songs on this one, and it's the Final Countdown.
Oh, yeah. I would agree with that 100%.
Which is by a band called Europe.
Is it really?
It really is. We've got a battle of the continents here, and this is a special segment that Zach doesn't know about that I'm bringing in today.
No.
So I went back into the archives of 1982, and believe it or not, there are 9 bands, maybe more, but at least 9 bands with location names that released music in 1982. There are 2 continents, 2 countries, 2 states, and 3 cities.
I love this already.
And so what I did is I went to each of their albums that came out that year and listened to the top song on that album. And I've got the rankings now. I've got my personal rankings of location-based band name songs from 1982.
This has to be the most specific statistical analysis or evaluation ever.
It's emotional analysis. There's no stats in it. This is just my feelings about these songs. So what we're going to do is we're going to count down. We're going to do a classic Hot 9 at 9 countdown from 9 to 1.
Okay.
So of these 9, my least favorite, it's a strange song, and maybe this band gets better with age, or as you've listened to them more, but it's the band Japan with the song Ghosts.
I don't know if I've ever heard it.
Number 8 on the list is our other continent. It's Europe, with their debut song, actually, In the Future to Come. Now, this is a song that won them a Swedish songwriting competition, but I will say they vastly improve over the next 4 years until Final Countdown comes out. This is you can see the seeds, but they are not even close to there yet. So number 8, In the Future to Come by Europe.
Okay. Japan, Europe. Got it.
Number 7 is our first city on the list. It's the song Dream On from Nazareth's 1982 album 2XS. Nazareth has a couple of good songs. I think Love Stinks is probably their most famous.
Yeah, I know I've heard some of their songs, so this isn't completely foreign to me, although Nazareth is a foreign city.
Yeah, they're not as good as Foreigner either. Well, actually, the band Nazareth is from the city of Nazareth, Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay, so they are not foreigners.
Only indirectly named after the Jesus of Nazareth city that we all know.
Okay.
All right, number 7 is our first appearance by a band named after a state. And from here on out, they're all pretty good. 6 through 1 are all pretty decent. The 7, 8, and 9, not good. Number 6 is Play the Game Tonight by Kansas.
Okay.
Off of, I can't remember the name of this album. But it's not as good as some of their classics, but it's decent.
Yeah. Kansas put out a lot of good music, if I remember correctly.
Yes. Number 5 is our other country on the list, America, the band America of Horse with No Name fame. But this song is called You Can Do Magic, and it's a pretty good light rock 80s groove. I gotta say, I enjoyed this one quite a bit.
Okay. I'm going to trust you on that one.
Number 4 in our location countdown on of the top 9 of 1982 is Hard to Say I'm Sorry / Get Away by the classic jazz rock band Chicago. It's exactly what you get when you think about Chicago. Easy listening.
Okay, yeah, that's Chicago for you. I think of Deep Dish Pizza, but
yeah, the band has some bangers.
Yeah,
but this isn't one of them, but it's fine. So we're in our top 3 now. Number 3, our last city on the list. We've done Nazareth and Chicago, but now we're on to Berlin, a band I'd actually not heard of before. But there's a song called Pleasure Victim. And the band sounds kind of like a proto-Madonna. Not as good as she was, but kind of a similar vibe. That's the band Berlin at number 3. And number 2, this is a band everybody knows. It's another one of these state bands. I think they might even still be playing in some form. Alabama. With the song Mountain Music. Not a huge Alabama fan, but I gotta admit that they know what they're doing. They've been together a long time. They're writing songs about living in the mountains and swimming in the fishing hole and all this stuff. And you know what? It works. Their shtick works. So
wait, that means we got lucky with our location-based album.
Indeed, it does. Because number 1, in my opinion, of the location-based bands that released music in 1982 is the song Heat of the Moment by today's topic, Asia, from their self-titled album, Asia. It's just too good. Nothing could touch it in this list of location-based bands that released music in 1982.
That might be my favorite list of music ever. We might have to do something like this each episode where we come up with just an obscure connection between songs or something. I don't know. I love this though.
My only disappointment was that the band Boston did not release any music in 1982. So I thought about squeezing them in there, but that wouldn't have been fair to Berlin or some of these others.
But next episode, we do get to talk about an album that has a location-based song.
Indeed. And maybe I'll leave that up to you to pick a list of songs based on locations.
Ooh, yeah, okay, maybe. Yes, we'll see about that. But yeah, we're talking about Toto 4, right?
We are.
Yeah, that'll be fun. I haven't listened to...
Yeah, it includes the Weezer hit Africa.
The Weezer. Yes, it does. It's a strange connection there, but you're right.
So that's the Grammy Album of the Year winner for 1982, correct?
It is, yes, yeah. And I mean, I think most people that were conscious of music and understand a little bit probably know about this album and some of the songs on it.
At least
you've
recognize
heard them.
the
I can
songs,
just about I guarantee you've heard some of them, even if you don't know it yet. But yeah, so the next episode we'll be talking about that one. We'll be talking about the award winner and the nomination for Best Picture, and also the award-winning book, which you said is Rabbit is Rich. Is that what it's called?
Rabbit is Rich by John Updike. That's right.
Okay.
And the movies we'll be talking about, well, E.T. was a nominee, so we're not going to rehash this conversation.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. But the other 4, the winner in 1982 was Gandhi. Popular movie. People have heard of it. I started to watch today because it's due back at the library in a couple of days, and I got to get through it. Another one is Tootsie, very famous. Mm-hmm. Lots of people still fans of this movie. But the other 2, The Verdict, directed by Sidney Lee Lumet, has kind of fallen out of favor. And the last one, Missing, directed by Costa Gavras, I'd never even heard of before.
Oh, I haven't either.
But my library had DVDs of all 4, so I've got a stack on my table that I'm going to work through. So I'm looking forward to this one because I think all 4 of them I haven't seen ever.
I think that's true for me too. So this will be a good experience to step into something that's completely unknown. I feel like I've seen clips of Tootsie, but I don't think I've ever seen the whole movie. So
yeah, I think same for me.
Yeah. So that'll be good experience. But yeah, then we get to wrap up 1982, and who knows? Maybe before that there might even be a bonus episode of some kind. Possibly.
And I think we're gonna have to do a 1982 bonus episode because if you look at the list of movies that came out in 1982. There's a lot of heavy hitters.
Yeah, and there's definitely some that weren't nominated for Best Picture that are lasting through our culture even today. So might have to pick one of those.
Like Tron.
It even got a remake not too long. Not a remake, but a rehashing not too long ago, right? Wasn't there Tron Legacy or something like that?
One.
I didn't either, but I knew it existed. Another one that got a remake was Gandhi, right? Gandhi 2, right?
This time. What is it this time? He's not back. This time he's not there for peace or something?
Yeah. I'll have the steak, medium rare.
Well, I have a hard time believing this one because at the very first scene of Gandhi, spoiler alert, he's dead.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you could just go to Wikipedia and read the life of Gandhi and you would find out the same thing. So I don't think it's that much of a of a spoiler.
I feel like we can't spoil anything that's over 40 years old. Well, that's why we chose the time frame we did. It's like we're not spoiling anything that's just happened in the last year or two.
Yeah. But other movies that came out in 1982 include John Carpenter's The Thing, which is held up over time. Poltergeist, Fast Times at Ridgemont High. There was a Rocky movie that year. Slumber Party Massacre also came out that year. Conan the Barbarian. Star Trek II. Annie the musical. It was just a year full of, I'm going to say classics, and I don't mean to imply that they're good. They're just memorable for me.
That might have something more to do with our age and the movies that were available to us at the time.
Yes. Grease 2 also came out in 1982, and that's a movie that no one knows existed.
It's called Too Greasy.
Too grease, too greasy? Is that too fast, too greasy? What are we talking here?
I don't know.
Oh boy, we're losing the plot.
Yeah. Anyway, maybe we should wrap things up here.
Yeah. Well, thanks for listening to our episode about the most popular movie, E.T., the most popular book, also the novelization of E.T., and the most popular album of 1982, Asia's self-titled debut album. I hope you liked it. Tune in next time for more 1982, I guess.
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan. We'll see you next time.
Bye.